Okay, so this is part 2 on how to teach students to build historical arguments. Between the time I published part 1 and right now, that task has not gotten any easier for us teachers. So if you, like me, have struggled mightily to teach your students argumentation, then this video is for you. So I'm going to build on what I said in the last video, and here we're going to look specifically at how to help students build arguments with documents. And let me tell you something, if you can master a reliable way to teach students how to make historical arguments, then I have no doubt that your class's pass rate will increase significantly. So in the last video, I told you about my discovery that students didn't primarily have trouble building historical arguments, they had trouble building arguments, period. So I explained the basics of argumentation apart from history, namely that every argument is built of two complementary materials, premises and a conclusion. Now I'm not going to cover the same ground in this video, so if you want to know more about that, then you can watch that video either here or I've got it linked in the description. But now I want to add to our foundation and talk about how to teach students how to build historical arguments using documents. If there's anything that makes our students feel more like recently expired coupons, it's trying to use a document to support an argument. So let me give you some simple steps to follow that I have found make that process far cleaner for students. So for students struggling with historical argumentation, one of the things that often trips them up is the creeping doom that seizes them when they have a prompt and a document or set of documents that they have to figure out. What I've found is that giving them a prompt first and then asking how you can use this document to support a thesis that responds to the prompt is way too many skills crammed into a small space than most can manage. So I found that breaking these skills into discrete steps is incredibly illuminating for them. So the first thing they needed to be able to do is to understand and interpret a document apart from the judgmental finger-wagging prompt that is causing them so much anxiety. So I give them a document, it doesn't matter what kind, and I ask them to do two things. Tell me what it says and tell me what it means. So first, tell me what it says. And this can be a revelation for some students because all we're doing here is observing what is in the document, and this is precisely the step that many of them skip. They want to jump right into what it means and how it can be used to answer that stinking prompt, and that is where most of their trouble starts. But first, just observe the document. What does it say? Or if it's visual in nature, what do you see? And I tell them this step is always performed with your finger. Like whatever you tell me in this step, you have to be able to put your finger on it in the document. So for example, in this political cartoon, what are the elements on which they can put a finger? Well, there's an oversized man holding a soldier and a school teacher. He has kind of a hungry, wily look on his face. Oh, that's Uncle Sam. And then these people over here have skeptical looks on their faces. Oh, those are Filipinos. It says Uncle Sam is giving them a choice, but this part is in scare quotes. Oh, and this was published in a satirical magazine called Puck. Now, they may not know what satirical means, but that's why they have us to explain it. So in this step, they are just observing, which by the way does two very important things. First, it builds their confidence. All they have to do is point things out, and I'm over there saying, yes, absolutely right, that's very good, what else do you see, etc. And then they're like, oh, I can do this. And then the second thing it does is to slow their interpretive process down, which in the beginning is going to help them immensely. Okay, now that they know what it says, now we can transition into what the document means. Given all the items upon which you just placed your finger, what conclusions can you draw about the intent of this document? And hopefully they find their way into explaining that this cartoon is critical of American imperialism, like the choice that's being offered is one of two forcible takeovers. And if they get there, that's all we need in this step. Gold star, let's move to step 2. Now, since they already know about how to build arguments with premises and conclusions, now I ask them, if this document was your premise, what conclusion could it support? Now again, I don't want to come anywhere near a prompt at this point, because when they learn to reverse engineer an argument in this way, they develop the skills they'll need to easily do it when it comes time to introduce a prompt. So let's start with a premise. Puck magazine presents a critical view of American imperialism. And look, I know what you're thinking, like, that's not enough detail, that's not enough explanation to earn the point, they have to say more, they have to, yeah, and I know. I will eventually teach them how to say more, but for now, all I'm doing is helping them construct an argument, and basics are what they need. So they have their premise, and then I ask them, what conclusion could this premise support? Well, you and I know more than they do, and we know that the two factions that fought over imperialism in American history, and we could name them. The cartoon is representative of the anti-imperialist faction, and we could even name some of them. But at this point, I don't want all that detail from them. The only conclusion I want them to make is, some Americans objected to the expansion of American empire. So then I have them put it all together in a coherent argument. Because Puck magazine presents a critical view of American imperialism, I can conclude that some Americans objected to the expansion of American empire. And at that point, pop the champagne, unfurl the streamers, your student just made a historical argument. And, I mean, don't pop the champagne in your class, that's illegal, and you don't want to, but you know what I mean. Okay, so don't miss what just happened. There is no prompt in the vicinity right now, but my students have learned how to build an argument using a document as evidence. And I want to do this over and over and over again until it becomes second nature nature to them, and once it is, we move to step 3. Now this step is just an extension of step 2. My students already know how to build an argument with one document, and now they need to go a step further and build an argument with more than one document, which requires them to interpret the documents and group them into categories. So I would start with 2 conflicting documents, go through the same process of what does it say and what does it mean for both documents, and then have them figure out what kind of argument they could make with each document separately. And that is an important step. This document can be used to argue that the causes of the English Civil War were political in nature, and this one can be used to argue that the causes were religious in nature. And then ask them to make a choice between them based on what they already know about the English Civil War. And then they can make a more complex argument. Despite such and such, because such and such, the real cause, etc., etc. And oh my goodness, do you see what's happening? Like, by breaking down into 3 steps what I had so often presented as 1 step, they are beginning to lean slowly into making complex historical arguments, and that leads us to step 4. Now, we've already done the work of helping them work and think like historians, but alas, in the world of AP, there's always an exam breathing down our necks. And so at this point, I would add a prompt in so that they can practice. Probably the easiest way to do this is by giving them a DBQ or a stimulus-based SAQ, but whatever you do, they will now have built the muscles of argumentation that they need to craft an argument supported by evidence in response to a prompt. Now again, to be clear, this isn't everything they need to earn points on exams, but it is the basic building blocks that will get them to that end goal. Okay, if you missed part 1 of this series, click here and give it a watch. Also, check the link in the description for my teacher resource packs that have a lot more argument building activities specifically geared toward the kind of writing your students are going to see on the AP exam. And thanks for hanging out with me. I'll catch you on the flip-flop. Heimler out.